Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe Vallejo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And today we are starting our 2025 CPL Preview series. Something that we have done last season that we're looking to continue in this season is take the month of March to preview all 8 teams in the CPL, all of the roster moves that they've done, all of the roster construction that they've undergone, some coaching changes that obviously a few teams have undergone as well, and preview all of the teams ahead of the beginning of the 2025 CPL season, which is under a month away. It's felt like forever since we started CPL, and now it's almost at our doorstep. So we're going to be going over all of the transfer dealings from the 8 teams, as well as all of the other news that's coming out over the course of the weeks. As usual, because we're doing 2 teams at a time, I'm certain that by mid-March, the first couple teams will look very different than what we initially previewed them as.
And in the same vein, we're doing it in alphabetical to give Vancouver a chance to catch up.
Yes, that might have been part of the reason why we went alphabetical and not, let's say, by activity or lack of. But we are going to go through all 8 teams, and since we're going alphabetical today, we're going to be starting with Atletico Ottawa and reigning CPL champs, Cavalry FC. But before we dive into the teams, remember to follow us on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, as well as finding us on YouTube under the same name. Now, Mike, let's start off with the big A, the capital side of Atletico Ottawa, and talk about some of the squad moves that they've undergone in these last few months since the end of the season. First, let's talk about something that we have talked about before, but let's just go for propriety. We'll go over the player losses, the biggest ones that they had in this offseason. Biggest one, I'd say, is obviously Matteo Debrien going to Gais in Europe. He's already featuring. I think I saw him that he was started a game. Was it? I think maybe a few days ago. He started his first game. I saw a lineup graphic with him in it, so I mean, fantastic for him to be featured and to continue to grow. Maxime Tissot retired. Ollie Bassett, we talked about it before. He went to USL. He went to the Tampa Bay Rowdies. Ruben Del Campo has gone back to Spain to sign with Murcia in the Segunda B, which is the 4th tier of Spanish. And then lastly, the only player that they've lost, big player that they've lost that stayed within the league is Chris Twardek going to Valor FC. And I'm sure we'll talk about Twardek and what he adds to Valor when we get to Valor. But looking at those 5 big departures from Ottawa, were you surprised, I guess, by any of them? Or how much do you think this will affect Ottawa? Because looking at, obviously, Ollie Bassett has been Mr. Atletico Ottawa for a few years. You know, Del Campo was their top goal scorer. Debrien, they got from Valor, and he was supposed to be this, attacking, marauding fullback. Same with Twardek on the right. So what did you make of these moves when they got announced?
Yeah, I mean, I was really surprised with the Twardek one. Debrien, we know there's been interest. Like he was on an upward trajectory, and I think Ottawa grabbed him and we'll keep him for as long as we can, but not expecting possibly not the longest career there, knowing of interest from abroad. But with him going, and obviously Tissot retiring, Twardek going, that's a big loss on both both fullback positions. Was straight away the new manager, and the roster build had big holes straight away in those areas, which they obviously had to. They've obviously gone and looked into. But I think Bassett, we could see towards the end of that season, like the rumors are going around, and I think we could see things weren't going as well as they had the years previously, and it just looked like the right kind of time for him, I guess. Del Campo, again, it's a weird one. I'm not sure how you feel about it, but obviously he had his purple patch at the beginning and struggled a little bit, and weren't 100% sure. And I kind of assumed they'd want to keep him, but maybe they just couldn't get the deal what they would have wanted. Maybe Del Campo was keen to get back to Europe. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure on the situation there, but I think out of all of them, Twadek was the strangest one for me. I thought they would have been much more keen to keep him around.
Yeah, especially since he's from Ottawa. It felt like he was a player that would have wanted to stay. Maybe it was the fact that he's sort of being played out of position, because I assume he wants to play further up because he was sort of a winger before coming, and then had to turn into what he thought was an attacking wing-back position. But under Carlos Gonzalez, I'm sure it became less attacking and less attacking as the season went on. I can only imagine frustrated to some degree. So maybe it had to do with like that. But one big loss that I forgot to mention is, as talking about Carlos Gonzalez, is the man himself, Cargo, leaving Atletico Ottawa. Not only have they lost some big players, but they lost their head coach. So Ottawa right now, definitely a team in transition.
Yeah.
You have a new coach coming in and a bunch of new players coming in. And with it, kind of a little bit of a reset after the intense pressure that the team was under last season because of the super team that they created. Now they still have a lot of those good players, but with a new coach and some new kind of, fresh blood injected into the team, maybe for Ottawa, it can kind of ease that pressure and kind of propel them and lay that good foundation for them to be successful in the upcoming year. But
do you think, before we jump into it, I'm not trying to go into I'm not trying to skip through something to agree with. Do you think this new coach now is in a better position than obviously Cargo was? Because, like you just mentioned there, he's still got quite a few of the pieces that was brought in as this super team, but the expectation is much lower because Cargo was win it or you're gone. So, the expectations may be lowered, and it's given that the chance to pick the players that we'll go on and talk about, but the coach maybe has a little less pressure on him than Cargo had last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain degree, because it's not as immediate as it was last season. Like when they were making these moves, it was headlines. Every move was a headline, and so the pressure naturally built up quite quickly.
And now, because of the year before under Cargo as well, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There was a lot building up to that pressure. I think because as a new coach, he has that fresh slate. He has at least a little while of grace for him to adjust to the league, for his play style to adjust and everything, where he's not going to be under that much pressure. But I'm still certain that he'll be under some pressure to succeed, because Ottawa want to be a team that's competing for the title again. They want to be a team that can, win the North Star Cup. So I'm sure it's not going to be like, oh, this year's a write-off. You just build, grow and learn. But yeah, I definitely feel like he's under less pressure than Cargo was, because, unfortunately for Cargo, because of Cargo's failings, I think a lot of fans and maybe the ownership group are a bit more understanding that this guy is going to come in and has to fix some issues. He has to fill some gaps, fill some holes. And so I'm thinking that he's going to have a little bit more patience about him than Carlos Gonzalez. But we'll see, because it really depends on how they start. Because if they start and they start losing 4 or 5 games in a row, well, there goes all your grace inside the first month.
Exactly. All that credit in the bank.
Exactly. So it really depends on how it goes. Because you're right, they still have a lot of those key pieces, so they still have that pressure to succeed, but maybe it's not as immediate, it's not as present, it's not as stressful as it was for Cargo at the beginning of the last season. But we'll see. We'll see, because you never know, especially when you look at the signings that they've made. Let's start off with the one that we know the best, and that is Noah Batman from York United here. I was quite surprised by this move. I think we talked about it a little bit before, but seeing the quality of player that Noah Batna is, he was one of the up-and-coming young center backs in the CPL, up-and-coming young center backs in Canada and in general, that I was a bit surprised that York United sort of allowed him to let it go. I don't know if it's because of play time. Maybe he has more assurances under.
It'd be interesting that.
Exactly. I'm not quite certain the details of the move, but nevertheless, it's a big move for both teams because of the quality is. Friend of the show, Josh Healy, did a great article about Noah Batna through the voice of Dwayne DeRosario, Canadian legend, on One Soccer and Dwayne DeRosario. He is a quality player that, recognizes quality, talked about how great of a player Noah Batna could be based on what he has already at such a young age. So I think for Atletico Ottawa, they now have two really good young Canadian center backs fighting for the spot alongside Amir Didic. You have Noah Batna, who just came in, and you still have Tier Walker, who is a good center back. When we talked to Alex Remick, the CPL by the numbers, when he was talking about Atletico Ottawa with him, he rated Tier Walker quite highly. I remember, and I think everyone who watches him rates him highly because of how much composure he has and everything. But having Noah Batna and Tier Walker fighting it out and having Amir Didic to sort of help them grow and develop. I mean, that's a formula for success, at least in the defensive end, from Atletico Ottawa right now.
Definitely. That's one. I don't know about you, but that's two players where I see them play, for Batney and Walker, where you're like, okay, there's a player there. Like Batney more because he's had that time, but both of them, and you're just screaming out for just give them a run. But neither of them are going to get that because you got me a Didic. There's going to be that as a complete neutral, that frustration of I want to see both of them play more games. Halfway through the season, I'm like, if only they had 3 or 4 extra games each.
No, and in a degree, it's good because it pushes them to be better because of that competition. Really, like you would say that they are the nailed-on partners. One of those two are the nailed-on partners to Amir Didic in defense. Assuming that when we talk about the coach, we'll talk about some of his history with tactics and stuff like that. But he likes to play a 4-back. And so you assume that the center back partner that Amir Didic will be one of those two. So it will be really good for them to push each other to their very fullest in competing for that starting place alongside Amir Didic in the league. And I think hopefully that'll bring out the best out of both of them. And I don't really know all that much about the new coach's, policy around substitutions and rotations. We'll come to see that when the season starts. But I'm hoping that for both Noah Batna and for Tier Walker, that they both get opportunities because they're both quality center backs that need more time and need more run of games, like you mentioned. And hopefully, they get that under Atletico Ottawa because they have some real good potential in their hands now in the defense. Some really, really good potential. And what better way to pair it than with some experience as well? And that's what they did by getting a former CPL player, Brett Levis, back into the CPL. The 31-year-old left back came from Detroit City in the USL Championship. He previously played for Valor FC, I think, for 2 or 3 years, and made 45 appearances for
Great
them.
goal against Ottawa.
Yeah.
The assist was Sean Raya.
Exactly. So Ottawa are
an
very
exaggerating assist. It was a little pass, but Levis did a lot of work.
They all count as that team. But yeah, Brett Levis started at Vancouver Whitecaps, and he was actually the first Saskatchewan player to sign a pro MLS contract. So he comes with a little bit of history with him and a lot of experience. I know when this signing was made, a lot of people were excited for it because he's an experienced fullback, experienced defender who's been around and was there at the beginning, towards the beginning of the CPL. So it's nice to have him back. And when you have a young center back, when you have a towering defender like Amir Didic, it's nice to have some experience, to shore up the back line there. They lost Mateo de Brienne, so I'm assuming that we're not going to see Brett Levis, fly up and down with the same wanton abandon as Mateo de Brienne did. But I'm sure he'll be a nice piece to fit inside the defense and hopefully make sure that Ottawa don't have those moments of shakiness and nervousness that sometimes they tended to show under Carlos Gonzalez. And hopefully he can bring a little bit more of that security at the back line.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, Ottawa no Vala, they can't just go and get another young, exciting left back just like that to replace Debrian, obviously. But it's good that get someone in that's going to shore them up a little bit, bring that experience. He's still going to get forward. It's not like it's not like they brought in this reserve guy that's just going to sit back and join like a very old-fashioned back four. Like their fullbacks don't go forward, we just go and defend. He's going to get there. He'll get up and down, but yeah, I think that experience, if you are going to be bringing in like those young centre backs and trying to get them involved, obviously there's more extra ones coming in. I mean, Didic is going to be the lone sort of experienced centre back in that part, sort of roster at the moment, really. So I think it's a really, really sensible move from them.
Yeah, I think that when you look at what they have just at the beginning of the preseason, they have a good foundation. I think anyone can agree that regardless of the issues that they have, from the goalkeeper to the center back to, you have Zapatero in the midfield, going up, Sam Salter's going to be a big year for him, but he can likely do a job there. It's about finding those pieces around them that can help and complement these pieces that they have, these stars that they brought. Manny Aparicio, another huge one. So it's nice that they're bringing in some depth pieces and some starters as well to help push the best out of some of these players. They continued signing youth. They signed somebody that Ottawa fans will be aware of and will know quite well if they're keen fans, and that's Loic Coultier. He is somebody who has actually trained with Atletico Ottawa and did so throughout 2024. He is an ex-CF Montreal Academy captain for the Academy and is featured for the under-20 internationals, the Canadian national team. He most recently played for League One Quebec side OSU Ottawa, and he's only 20 years old. So another youngster, under 21, which is great for them. So he'll probably see minutes. Apparently, according to the press release, he's an ambidextrous defender that can play anywhere across the defense. So I'm guessing that means he's two-footed. I'd have to imagine. But yeah, I mean, another young player that will likely get chances because of the under 21 minutes, and a local boy. I'm sure a lot of Ottawa fans will be happy to see someone that has been sort of in and around the Ottawa picture finally get his chance. And at only 20 years old, he still has a lot of room to grow. So another nice little pickup there from Ottawa as they continue to bring in some good potential, and specifically in the back line. But now let's talk about some of the additions that they've had in the attack.
Yes.
Because that's something that they definitely need after the loss of Ruben Del Campo. And they brought somebody in who I think is one of the most underrated acquisitions in the league right now, at least if you look at his stats and his record. And that is Kiwi Monty Patterson. The CPL loves their Kiwis. Meyer Bevan was great when he was here. Moses Dyer had a fantastic little fairy tale story last year as well.
Old classmates, aren't they? I think.
I believe they're classmates. He talked this guy. His name is Monty Patterson. He's a fellow Kiwi. He apparently spoke with Dyer and started to follow the CPL a little bit after like a year or two ago after speaking with Dyer about it. So clearly he was convinced enough to come here because now he's playing for Atletico Ottawa. 28-year-old winger/attacker. He most recently featured for Kiwi side Birkenhead United and has played 15 times for the All Whites in his time. So he's an international, which is nice for New Zealand, which is a pretty decent team in the grand scheme of things. And the biggest thing, though, is that in all competitions last year for Birkenhead United, he had 24 goals and 3 assists in 30 appearances. Now, it's always tough to compare what certain leagues are to the CPL. So while that does look impressive, we don't know how the quality of that league matches up with the CPL and yada, yada, yada. So, I don't want to blow too much smoke, but scoring goals is scoring goals. And as a winger / attacker, not as a striker, to score those kind of goals, it was pretty impressive. And he has a really relatively good resume. He's played for Ipswich Academy. I think that's where he started out, and then went to some of the 4th and 5th division of England. He's played in Australia, obviously New Zealand. He even went to Norway, and it came to the USL for the Chicago team. I'm forgetting what the name of the Chicago team is right now, but played for many different teams across many different.
Oklahoma City. Sorry.
Oh, it was Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City. I just seen that.
So played for many different teams. A bit of a journeyman, which some players like to be, and especially the ones that the CPL gets tend to be a lot of journeymen. But looks like a decent player. I mean, the stats alone show that he can be productive. And his little press release, he talked about he really works hard to not only create chances and opportunities for himself, but for his teammates around him. I think he looks like a decent pickup. And at 28, he has that worldly experience that I think will help him out to adjust to a league quickly and hopefully hit the ground running with Ottawa.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, this one, because like a while ago, look at the Australian A-League as something that I think the CPL needs to like look to try and compete with, maybe before like ignoring MLS to start with, as like a progression of where to go. And obviously, like Wellington Phoenix is the big side in New Zealand that compete in the A-League. So these sides in New Zealand are just in the country itself. Finding out how that compares and seeing how players do going between them is going to be really interesting, just like from a fan's perspective, like looking into the league as how players, because the Aussies have done great since they come in, the majority of them that will come across from playing in the A-League, not getting many games for some of them. Obviously, they've come in and had a decent impact. But if this is a potential other route and another area for clubs to be looking into for finding players, this could be really interesting if this does hit the ground. And one thing, you look back and you say, okay, well, he's only done his productive seasons have been in New Zealand. They haven't been earlier on in this, in like when he's been in Norway and the US and in England. He hasn't been as productive, but he was a lot younger. Like, so you got to like we need to take that into account. Like he's been going backwards and forwards. He's got himself sorted. He's matured as a player as you go through that. So now he's got that. I mean, like you say, goals are goals, like wherever you're playing. So now you've got that sort of positive attitude going into those games, the confidence that comes with it. If this can kick off really well, it's like a brilliant acquisition for Ottawa, and it's really clever business.
Yeah, and that's always the case with the CPL. It kind of makes it exciting, is that players can come in and they can have great records, and then they can flop in the league and not really do anything. Players can come in with no record and do really well right away.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like every player is a hit or miss. Every player is a different situation. And obviously it's like that, you know, in the world in general, in the world of football. But I feel like even more so, there's more of an element of the unknown because of the sort of the newness of the league and how young the league is.
The budgets of the start, like the scouting departments, like you're trying to get. It's not like they've got agents in
all four corners of the world.
Every continent's got different scouts all over it, building that. It's not like that. Like your interview with Ashton Gotby the other year, like when you did Vancouver deep dive, it's like was it Ashton that when it's almost like shopping off Amazon when you're going like
sometimes it's basically like window shopping. You just look at a couple clips and you think, are we going to take a punt? Let's take a punt. And it's, to a degree, it's concerning. But to a degree, it's exciting because it's almost like you'll never know where you're going to get. And sometimes you get some real diamonds in the rough, some real gems. And then other times, maybe a lot of the times, if you're certain teams, you kind of get players that maybe are not what you necessarily bargained for. But nevertheless, you look at a player like Patterson and you think he could be something special. And I feel like, especially when you bring in players that are like 26, 27, 28, 29, like in their later 20s. Maybe I'm biased because now I'm in my later 20s. I felt I was.
I remember those years.
Yeah. Shoot, I keep talking about age. But I remember when I was younger, I used to always think like, oh, you want to get the younger players. But now, as I've aged, I realized that bringing these older players with the experience that they have, it's more likely for them to succeed because they've had more, miles under their belt and more opportunities and more lessons to have learned. So Monty Patterson, I think for me, is one I'm definitely going to keep an eye on
Yeah.
for Ottawa this season. But they have two more signings that they've made, two more big signings that they've made that I want to talk about. First of all, David Rodriguez, loan signing from San Luis and their under 23 team. Mexican international or youth international, 22 years old. He is an attacking midfielder / right winger, which is an interesting combo. He had 6 goals and 4 assists for San Luis under 23, and even scored a goal in the playoff final versus Tigres under 23, to which San Luis went to go win the whole thing. So that was nice for him. I was already played in a relatively big game for his and performed well for his age group. He has made 16 appearances for San Luis's senior team in Liga MX, and previously started out his career playing for North Texas in the USL and Austin 2 at MLS Next Pro. And in that spell with Austin 2, he made 24 appearances, had 6 goals and 3 assists, and helped them on their way to winning the 2023 championship in MLS Next Pro. So he's already been accustomed at the young age of 22 to winning, which is nice. He's already been used to lifting silverware, and sure, there are youth teams and development leagues, but still winning is winning. Same thing as scoring goals is scoring goals.
Yeah.
So nice to have that little mentality about him, already 22 years old. And again, knowing some of the mixing players that have come through the CPL already, ever since York got that Mexican ownership, it feels like there's been more and more Mexican influence and more Mexican contacts in the league since sort of the beginning of last year. So knowing what players that come in, I'm excited about this, David Rodriguez, because you're bound to have somebody that brings a lot of energy, brings a lot of grit, determination, a little bit of feistiness, likely too. Young, especially attacking midfielders, wingers that come from Mexican academies are usually tricky. They have like a good technical repertoire. So I'm excited by this signing. I think that, again, bringing another relatively young player into the team, helping them develop. It's only a year-long loan, but you could always extend it, and if things go well, I think it's good for both parties to have a player like that you can call upon as depth, and for the player to have more opportunities to play, against men, in the proper league.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, obviously, all those experiences, like you've mentioned, and then you say like the MLS Next Pro stuff, like we're seeing players go to and from the league, and it's good moves for some of them going to MLS Next Pro sides, like depending on the club. And obviously, Austin 2 did some really great work. We saw how well on the first season some of the Columbus Crew players did. Players like Mo Farsi, obviously. So getting that opportunity, and when they are in a really good Next Pro side, they are getting some great opportunities to develop. So this could be, I'm on board with you here. Like it could be a really exciting signing. Like it could be a really big step for him. Could be a stepping stone where we see him absolutely like set the league on fire. It could be him getting used to playing in the more sort of senior level. We'll have to wait and see where that comes. But yeah, really interesting.
Yeah. And I think he'll be helped out by this last signing, which technically I think was their first signing, which is sort of why I left it for last, because we talked about it a little bit. And that is a fellow Mexican midfielder, and Juan Coque, his nickname, Castro, a 33-year-old veteran midfielder. He is very well known and very well loved in San Luis as well, because he is their record appearance holder. He's been there for many, many, many years. He scored 19 goals across his lengthy span playing for San Luis, and has helped them raise 3 pieces of silverware in his time. Saw a couple interviews, saw the news when it broke out, and seemed like a good, quality, experienced player to bring to the league. And what I'm interested to see is how this new coach balances having this experience in his midfield, because you have El Toro, you have Zapatero.
Yeah. Well, playing him alongside Adoro, Koke's now the youngster.
Yeah, it's
Again.
true. Cookie, yeah,
he's gonna
Cookie will feel like
have his
26
running.
all over
He's
again.
gonna have a lot of running.
Exactly. So, but that's the thing, right? Like, how do you balance
Yeah.
having two over 30 players in your midfield? That will be what's
Yeah.
interesting for me to see what the new coach does. But
Well, luckily Aparicio does a lot of running.
it's very true.
It's,
Aparicio loves to
he's
run. So
everywhere.
maybe that's how you balance it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is a very smart signing, I think, from Atletico Ottawa. They've brought in a lot of these young players. It's also good to bring in some experience as well. They did that with Levis. Now they did that with Castro as well. And a player with such experience for San Luis in both divisions of Mexico. That's somebody that is used to the high standards that you need to be at, because Liga MX is fighting with MLS to be the best team in the best league in CONCACAF. So with that comes a lot of standards and practices. I'm sure that for Koke, he's going to bring in and hopefully raise the standards even more for Ottawa, which is, I think, what they definitely need after the last couple of seasons of disappointment in some regards. I think that a player like that can kind of bring in and help the atmosphere a bit to make it more maybe professional, a little bit more disciplined, and help them kind of push that a little bit more to reach those levels that they want to be at in around Cavalry and Forge.
Yeah, definitely. I think they just need. It's going to be weird. Like they need those bits of experience on the pitch, but it's going to be interesting to see what this manager's approach is, or this head coach's approach is, because we got very used to what Cargo was. That needed to change, obviously. So how this starts is going to be really interesting to see how he can use those players, but get the best out of the young ones as well.
And speaking of the new coach, let's talk about him. Let's talk about the new coach. We've been just calling him coach because I didn't want to ruin the build up, the reveal. But the new coach is, of course, Diego Mejia, a Mexican coach. He is a former footballer. He made 400 career appearances across both divisions in Mexico, so has seen his fair share of pro football. Most recently, he was part of the Juarez team, originally the assistant manager, and then briefly became the first team manager at the end of the 2023 Clausura. He did not last too long, unfortunately, though. He only lasted 28 games from the end of the 2023 Clausura until the end of the 2024 Apertura, with a less than impressive record of 6 wins, 6 draws, and 16 losses. That being said, he was kind of screwed from the beginning, because from what I've gleaned, from what I've researched, Juarez have like in recent history not been a good team. They've been scraping by in that 12th to 14th position in Liga MX. Actually, right now they're in one of the strongest positions. They're in one of the playoff spots, or for like the final stage at the end of the Clausura, in 5th or 6th after 10 games. So they're actually doing quite well right now. But usually they're not a very good team. So the record is not great, but also you have to understand the context. Looking at some of the games that he played, I went through some of the games and the highlights. It seems like he likes to play with a 4-back. He likes to switch between a 4-4-2 and a 4-5-1. A couple of times he went for a 4-2-3-1. Again, it's hard to really glean how much of the issues that were happening at Juarez were because of him and his tactics and his style, and less about just there is that gap in Mexican soccer between the big guys, the star teams that have a lot of money, and then the other teams that don't have as much money and don't have as much quality. So you have to understand that as well. But looking at it holistically, I think it's a pretty decent coaching change. Again, I'm not an expert in Liga MX. I did just like a little bit of research going into it, but I think that if, the people at Atletico Ottawa believe that he fits in with the culture and fits in with the vision, and he can build this team to be greater than its sum of its parts, which I feel like was missing from Atletico Ottawa last season. It relied very much on its individual parts. If this guy can bring in and come in and kind of allow the team to be greater than the star players that it still has, then I think it'll be a success, regardless of what his past sort of spells out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how much he is prepared and got ready for this, with like understanding that obviously the huge differences between Liga MX and the CPL, and getting prepared for that, getting used to his team. Obviously, you've got there the signings that we've spoken about suggest that that back four with the lone striker and using attacking midfielders will be the way to go. They've kept the likes of Tabla and players like that will play off of Sam Salter at the moment. So it looks like the roster he's got seems to fit that sort of style that he's used, that you've gone back and seen from him. It's just it is a great unknown, isn't it, for them? York United and other sides. It's a young manager who was given a bit of a shot in a very difficult situation, and now he's moving somewhere completely new. So he's gonna find out a lot about himself as much as we are finding out about him.
It's very true. It's very true. I feel like when you have a young manager come into the league, sometimes it can go very well. You look at, James Merriman, given that shot and did quite well given the circumstances. And then at times you have young coaches come in and maybe don't exactly do as well as maybe they want to, but it's all part of learning. I think for him, we talked about the pressure earlier. It's not as great, but there's also going to be great personal pressure for him to succeed because of the failure that he had with Juarez.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's young, he's hungry, he wants to succeed, he wants to get that repertoire. That was his first gig with Juarez, and it lasted only 28 matches. It was a trial run, if anything. And now I think this is going to be, for him, the real opportunity to be like, okay, now this is your real start. You have a team that, comparative to the rest of the league, is one of the stronger teams financially and is one of the teams that is better backed and better supported. Now let's see what you can do, because Liga MX has a certain culture, has a certain history. And this one, we were just starting to build that kind of culture and history. So it allows them to have a little bit more freedom to kind of think outside the box, try different things. Maybe he won't go at all with what I was saying at the 4-4-2, 4-5-1. Maybe he wants to try something completely different now because he has the freedom to. I am very much excited by it, because with any young coach, they always bring fresh ideas. And that's what I really enjoy, is that a lot of these up and coming coaches have a different way of viewing the game. So I'm excited to see what he can sort of pull out of Atletico Ottawa. But there's still the pressure, not only because he is now with a better team comparative to the league, compared to the team that he had before, but also for himself. He wants to succeed. I'm sure of it. And he'll need to sort of not hit the ground running necessarily, but sort of at least show those early signs that whatever he's cooking up is worthwhile.
No, it's going to be really interesting. Really excited by it.
But now the big question is, what else do they need? Because like we mentioned, the season is less than a month away, but clubs can still make signings. Looking at what they've brought in a lot of players comparative to some other teams, including the team that we'll talk about next. But for you, Mike, what do you think they're still in need of? What holes still need to be filled?
The big one for me is the Del Campo replacement. I think we've got players that can play off of a striker, but you've just got Sam Salter now that looks like the only out-and-out centre forward in this group. You've got different options and different variations across most of the rest of the pitch, but there's a lot of pressure on Salter right now. If things don't go quite well, or an injury, I'm not sure what their backup is if they are to play with a central striker. So I think Whether they get one or not, I'm not 100% sure. Whether they're going to play in a very, very different way, but I think they would be keen to bring someone in that can push Salter for a place as the starting nine.
Yeah, I think I'm in the exact same mindset as you. I'm
They
looking at
covered everywhere else, don't they?
everywhere else. Even at right back now, Jonathan Grant is coming back from his long-term injury, so they should be pretty solid there. So I think really it's just finding competition for Sam Salter, and then that's about it. They've done their business pretty early on, and they look probably one of the most complete sides out of all of the teams in the CPL so far. So yeah, good on them, and I think just the striker. Okay, before we move on to Cavalry, last little question here: higher or lower? I love playing this game in many other regards. So I figured why not we play this game for the CPL as well. So they've finished Atletico Ottawa in third place last season on 44 points with a record of 11 wins, 11 draws, and 6 losses. A lot of draws, which is what really killed them in the end. Looking at the business they've done, looking at the players they've lost, and of course, the new coach they've brought in, do you think that they will finish higher or lower than third place?
I'm going to go lower. It's really difficult because we don't know the manager. And it could we're still without being there and seeing how they're playing and the type of football he's bringing to the squad. But I look at it and I'm concerned that Sam Salter isn't going to score as many goals as Del Campo did last year. I'm concerned that some of their attacking midfielders aren't consistent players. And I'm concerned that they have relied upon very strong defensive performances and they've got a brand new defense. Almost. And so to get those draws and to get some of those wins was on the first half of the season, as cargo seasons go. Would rely upon those defenders keeping things out. I'm not sure how much they can do that if they're not scoring week in, week out, and we saw that towards the end of the season with them at times as well again. Yeah, I'm going for lower. I think some of the other teams will improve as well. So I mean, Halifax, yeah. So how about you?
I am I'm in the same sort of boat. I do think they'll finish slightly lower than what they did before. I still think they'll have a pretty strong season, but again, like you mentioned, we don't know really about the coach, and there's still some questions asked about the consistency in the players. I also think really I look at some of the other teams. I know we'll talk about them in later episodes, but just to throw an early name out there like Pacific and the moves that they've made this offseason, I think they've gotten a lot stronger and might be pushing Ottawa for that third place. Forge and Cavalry, you kind of can't bet against them being in the top two. No. So it really is about third and fourth place, at least right now. Maybe there'll be some moves in the future that make us think otherwise, but I think they'll be just slightly lower than third place.
Yeah.
But that is it for Atletico Ottawa in the preview for them. Now let's move on to Cavalry FC. We spent a lot of time talking about Atletico Ottawa, but that is also because they had a lot of business
bit more than
going on. Meanwhile, Cavalry FC, I mean, the saying goes, if it ain't broke,
exactly.
Cavalry had such a good end of the season last season and have had very, very strong seasons for the last few seasons.
And let's face it, a really good effort in CONCACAF.
And already early signs that they're not looking to slow down.
Yeah.
Why change anything?
Yeah.
So Cavalry have only made one transfer in this offseason, and that is the signing of Kanija Elva, 28-year-old Calgary-born Canadian forward. He left Canada to Germany for Stuttgart when he was 18 years old and spent a decade essentially there, playing for Stuttgart's second team, playing for Wurzburger Kickers, FC Ingolstadt, and most recently Rot Weiss Erfurt.
That's a really good effort, man.
Yeah, I know, right? I might have spent a little bit of time beforehand trying to put on my best German accent and try to look at names. So I appreciate that it came through.
You did a whole lot better than I would have.
Yeah, German is a tough one, so I had to make sure I was prepared. But he made 184 appearances overall in this 10 years in Germany, scoring 25 goals and adding 27 assists. He also is an international for St. Lucia and has played 12 times for them and scored 5 goals. He did feature for Canada at the youth level, but opted to play for St. Lucia instead. Now, this is actually one of the most well-known Canadian players to come back into the CPL. I remember when Elva left Canada a decade ago and was picked to be a pretty hot prospect before Canada had hot prospects. You know, in the time before Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David and stuff like that, when hot prospects were kind of few and far between. Anybody that went to Europe immediately became a hot prospect, even if maybe wasn't to the best league or the best team. You know, that was during the very raw age of Canadian soccer at the turn of the 2010s. But I remember when he left, I thought he was going to be a good player. And I remember trying to keep tabs on him early on in his career when he was at Stuttgart. And so I'm excited to see how he's grown because from what I remember seeing of him early on, and from what we've been able to glean from him, from his cameos in CONCACAF, he is the perfect foil for an Ali Musi. They're both tall, lithe, limber wingers. They like to take their man on. They like to be creative. They like to be adventurous on the ball. You can sort of see that with Tommy. That's what he always likes, is to have those really creative, dangerous, lethal wingers that can score goals, but more than anything can cause problems. He's had Ali Musi now for a couple of seasons do that. He had Willie Accio, he had Gauthier Antigny, you can even throw Jay Herdman in there a little bit. He likes to have those wingers with that kind of profile. So I think this is probably his best signing in that profile. I would just on name and resume alone so far. That's how highly pipped he is, and for the CPL, for the league that it is, and for the quality that it is, this is one of the signings of the season so far. I don't know if it will live up to that, but I am very, very intrigued to see Elva enter the league because with the experience that he has, everything that I talked about previously, we were talking about Patterson, Ottawa, applies for Elva.
Yeah.
And I would say even more so because he's proven it at a higher level in the Bundesliga 2 and Bundesliga. So I think that it's a very, very shrewd signing from Cavalry and only makes a strong team stronger.
Yeah, I think what intrigues me like more as well on this signing is the fact that Akio Shaw and Lowell Wright have all gone. So that forward line now, like Herdman, Musi, and Wojciechowski were fantastic. It's not like you're looking at that. At no point was Tommy going, "Yeah, like I need to improve on this." Like it's not. He wasn't looking at it thinking there's a weak link in that group at the end of the season. But bringing Elva in, he looks like a player who will then could rotate between any of those three positions. He hasn't really got, if you look at some of the other players in this, I mean, we've got Chanda, but a young player who's still like improving himself. If you ever need to give Wojciechowski some time off, or if you have to rotate things around, it looks like he could be that player that will go in. It will adapt how they attack, because obviously they're not the exact same type of player. But that's what excites me quite a bit about Cavalry, because they can be very like, you know what you get at times, like as the season goes on, we'll manage a game throughout the match. It's not like they go hell for leather every match. They do manage games really well, but this is going to be a new way of them playing, and that's quite exciting. I like to see how Tommy's going to keep progressing as a coach and keep adapting as a coach and throwing out all these new things. That's probably going to drive Bobby mad.
Yeah. That's exactly what Tommy wants.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Tommy dreams of. Driving Bobby wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's even though it's the only transfer business they've done, really it's the only transfer business they really needed to do well, at least in the attacking side of
Yeah.
the pitch. You know, you lost those 3 players, but were they really adding all that much? I mean, maybe you want to bring in somebody that can play second fiddle to Tobias Wachowski. Maybe that's something that they'll look out to do before the start of the season. But aside from that, from the attacking point of view, they're pretty much set. Like you said, they're already stacked. So they don't need to change anything.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
bringing in Elva, he's someone that can be at that level or above that level than what he already has at his disposal. So it's just like a fantastic deal all around.
Yeah.
The only thing that you would say that they maybe need to address is, of course, the massive hole that they have in the back line because of Dan Klomp's departure. Moved to Raoul Lalouvière in Belgium recently, finally found a home in Europe after searching for a little while.
Yeah.
Massive hole, won Defender of the Year with Cavalry last year. Loved to pop in with the goals, was an absolute leader, an absolute tank at the back. And yeah, I mean, as good as Cavalry are, Klomp was a big reason why they were as good as they were. Now, I say that they need to find somebody to replace them. During CONCACAF against a tough
Yeah.
team, we saw Eric Kobsa and Callum Montgomery play together, and after a little bit of growing pains, they performed quite admirably. I think that they
Yeah.
had good performances across both legs in general,
Yeah.
and now maybe it's the time for an Eric Kobsa to step up and just be that guy, and maybe Tommy just thinks that Cal Montgomery can be the player that leads the line at the back, and maybe they don't necessarily need to bring somebody in. But just looking at the quality that Klomp had, do you think that they should find someone else, or do you think that they are fine with just having Montgomery and Kobsa be the defensive pairing?
I'm kind of hopeful they stick with it, to be honest. Like I was last year when they went in and they played Orlando, didn't they, in the CONCACAF last year?
Yeah.
And I was like, I looked at it and thought, because he looked really panicked and he looked all over the place. Like he had such a good first season. Maybe last season, like 2024, was the season to actually let's get set. Like it's not going to go perfect every time, and he's had this year behind Klump to just prepare himself for becoming the first choice centre back in the partnership. And and that's what I'm keen. I think this year 3 for Eric Kobsa is going to be huge. I think he could really have like a big part to play in this team. And I think the way they seem to be set out, the way there doesn't seem to be huge rumblings of rumors of them chasing a big Dan Klomp replacement, I think they're confident that Kobsa's had this. Like everything went fantastic at first. Yeah, you've had some growing pains. Like it's come back down, and you've had to adapt. And he looks like he's fought back, and he's got like he's much more sort of an accomplished and confident central defender. And I'm quite keen to see this continue as the two of them going into the season.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I do think that having some chances for players like Eric Kobsa are what you need in the league
Yeah.
like this, because he's a player that has shown growth and has shown ability and potential. I think if Tommy does trust in both of them, which is a very Tommy thing to do, to repay players that are loyal to him and that work hard for him,
Yeah.
I think that might be what he goes with, and I think it will work as long as they continue to have that form that they showed across both legs against Pumas. I think that they can have a really good, productive season together. The real question is, if one of them gets injured,
then we got problems. Yeah,
then you have problems. So maybe you don't bring
someone
in
needs to come in, but
a star center back to
yeah,
replace Klomp because you already got Callum and you already got Eric.
yeah,
Maybe you bring somebody in to provide cover and competition for them to make sure that, maybe it's nice to keep the players on their toes sometimes and
exactly.
not think that their position's granted. push them to be better, but also in case any of them get injured or suspended, because we know how suspensions work in CPL. You could be out for 3 games if you get a straight red. You need to have cover in this league. So I think that will be probably something that they will definitely want to look forward, is to maybe not fill that gap from Dan Klump, but just have some depth.
Yeah, just add some new competition, isn't it? I think it's, I mean, Montgomery, like Callum Montgomery and Eric Cobbs possibly aren't going to score as many goals as Dan Klump. He was very good in both boxes, but I think the two of them could continue to play defensively very well. And yeah, if you add a mix into that, so there can be rotation for like just in general, as well as, like you say, suspension injuries. That's just sensible roster building.
Yeah, and I think it kind of answers the what do they need part of it, because
there's not much in
there. Because not much. There's still great, they're a fantastic team, fantastic players. I mean, you look at the players that they re-signed / triggered options. That's Tom Field, Bradley Camden, Callum Montgomery, Jesse Daly, Jay Herdman, Milo Henry, Shamit Shome, Ali Musi, Tobias Wachowski, Nico Mironik. That's that team right there that you just re-signed. And I'm not going to say like, oh, they're like new signings. No, but this is the team that brought you the championship. Of course, you're going to want to keep them on. And we've seen that in North American sports, especially, a championship team, usually after they win, they get gutted or players leave or they have difficulties. And because, the league tries to give more of the benefits to the lower team so they can promote parity. So a lot of the times, the team that wins the championship sort of gets punished. And that's why you get to see a lot of different winners across the years, and you don't see dynasties be created. But in the CPL, it does find that middle ground where there is a lot of parity, as you can see from the last couple of seasons. Last season was one of the most even leagues you've ever seen, like anywhere. But it also has a little bit of that freedom where teams can continue to have those strong players and continue to build the dynasty. I mean, Forge, you look at Kyle Becker, you look at Tristan Borges, Ashina Jonsson, David Chouanier. These guys have been around since day one. They're the reason why Forge are who Forge are. But same goes for Cavalry. You look at a lot of the players, they might not have retained as many day oneers as Forge have, pretty much only Carducci and Camargo. But the players that have done them well in the last couple of seasons stay there. So Hampton, Montgomery, Jesse Daly, Showme in the last season and a half. Obviously, Warshawski. These are players that just signing them on should be as exciting as a new signing, because even more so maybe than a new signing, because you already know what they can do in this team. You already know what quality they can bring, and now you get to see them for longer. So even though Cavalry haven't made much business, having those options triggered or re-signing those players is incredible business already from them, and already sets them up to have hopefully as good of a year as last year, if not better.
Yeah. And teams, like, if they continue to win year on year, you can, like, you've got players who might lose a bit of motivation somewhat, like just go through the motions a bit. But I think Cavalry are under Tommy Weldon Jr., you're not gonna just coast. Like, that's not gonna happen. Like, you're not gonna be allowed to do that. The players they've got in that team, the leaders in that team, aren't gonna allow that to happen. And they want a double. They want to win both. Like, that's, you can tell the way they play, the way they're set. They want to just dominate. They want a year that everything is Cavalry. Like,
everything comes out Cavalry red.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the, obviously losing out just those 2 points behind Forge by the end of the season last year in the regular season. That was they just want to make up those 2 points and win the playoffs as well again. That's what they're going into this season, knowing they can achieve if they put their minds to it, and if they work hard, because they've got the quality.
Yeah, and I feel like with what they have, they'll be able to do that. They'll be able to, or at least have a right good chance of being the first team to get the double.
Yeah,
I wouldn't put it past them. But that brings us to final question then for Cavalry. Do you think that they will finish higher or lower than last season? Obviously, they finished second, like you mentioned, 2 points behind Forge
Yeah.
on 48 points, a record of 12 wins, 12 draws, and only 4 losses. So, are they going to build on that and be better, or are they going to maybe fall a bit beneath it?
Yeah, I mean, those draws have got to go down this year. Like they
Mm.
draw a lot, and I think that's got to go down a bit. The difficulty is, and obviously in 3 episodes' time, we'll be talking about Valor's challenge for the regular season. But
Really?
but no, I can't look past them at the moment. Looking at the rosters we've got on this day, and before we go on to the next few weeks, and things may have changed quite a bit, I can see them doing both. Like I can see them winning the regular season and the playoffs. I think they can go better this year.
Yeah.
I'm
What?
ready to throw my money in on Cavalry.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Just looking at, we'll talk about Forge in next week's
Mm.
episode, but looking at both teams, for me, Cavalry just seem to have a little bit more right now.
Mm.
And it's very marginal between the two teams.
Yeah.
But just personally, and maybe it's because I'm still living off the high of the CPL final last season. Cavalry just gave me a little bit more, I think, than Forge. And especially off CONCACAF, yes, Forge had a much tougher opposition in Monterrey.
Mm.
Even still, just based off that and the end of last season, I think Cavalry give me a little bit more. Probably will eat our words at the end of the season with Forge, as we often do. But for now, we can continue to hope and dream. And yeah, I think that Cavalry are going to go for the shield.
Mm.
But that is it for this week's preview episode. First 2 teams down. We have 6 teams to go. Next week, we'll talk about Forge and Halifax before we move on to the last 4 teams in the following weeks. But thank you so much for listening to the beginning of our preview series. Make sure to follow us once again on all of our socials and let us know what you think about your team's preseason so far. Are you confident that they'll do well? Do you think they're going to do better or worse than they did last season? Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. But until next time, I'm Felipe Ojo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC signing out.